Eminence. Go throw them knees up in the air. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
9, 8, 7. We have a go for main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff.
Travis Scott, Tugger, baby. I bought a four. I call your whore. Just a fucking short. I just went got my door. Pull it off and I'm gone. Then I go up before. Then I roll up that roll up. Then I'm calling your whore. Like, pick up the phone, baby. Like, I know you're home, baby. It's lit. I'm in the zone, baby. Straight up. I just put up before, baby. Yeah. Never will I cheat on you. Never will I commit treason. Blowing a bag on you. You all of that for no reason. I'ma pull up in my toe. Hitting the block and I'm bleeding. Throwing that rolling on you. I like the way it be freezing. Pick up the phone, baby. I know you're home, baby. It's lit. I'm in the zone, baby. Straight up. I just put up before, baby. Yeah. Before that, that been lean like my mother vanity. Super Bowl ring with big body bins. I stacked it up, now I'm just better.
What is up, SFL Nation? And happy Thanksgiving. Welcome back to SFL Nights with A.J.Striker. Thank you so much for joining me today or tonight or whenever you decided to hit that play button or turn on that radio dial. I really appreciate it, y'all. And I have here with me on this very special Thanksgiving Day celebration my good friend and commissioner, Cameron Irvine. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing well, Ashley. Happy Thanksgiving to you. What are you most thankful for?
I'm most thankful for my children. I'm most thankful for my children being resilient in times of distress and changes. And they've been wonderful throughout the changes that have been occurring in life. So I'm really thankful for that. What are you thankful for?
I am most thankful for rats.
For rats?
Circle of life. Everybody has a purpose. Rats chew internet cords and leave me in the dark for 5 days. Right before Thanksgiving weekend. That's cool. No, seriously. I'm just thankful to be alive, Ashley. It's amazing. I was watching Our Universe on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
It's just unbelievable that we are here on this spinning rock. And it's just, it's amazing, like just living in the moment. So that's what I'm most thankful for.
That's good. So you telling me that right now you don't have no internet, Cam?
That is correct. Now for the next 4 days, unless something miraculously appears or happens, I do believe that for the second time this off season, a rodent of some kind has chewed through a fiber line. The first time that it was repaired, we all just kind of looked at each other and just figured it was a fluke. But fiber lines are not as easy to replace or fix, and so we're gonna assess the damage once it's dark. Or I'm sorry, when it's not dark. Once the sun is back up in the sky, and try to see if we can identify something. But that is most likely what occurred, and that, Ashley, is just life, isn't it?
It is, but you need to get a few cats. You better take care of that.
They're very fragile and would never survive outside. So, But it was good, Ashley. I was outside, kind of poking around in the dark, looking at things, and it seemed like every dog in the neighborhood was barking at a spotted intruder somewhere. So feel very safe in my home tonight.
I bet you do. I kind of want to kick that rat's butt for messing with your cords like that, but such is life, man.
Such is life.
Monday will be right around the corner, and now if you're looking for somewhere to go, you can always fly to Arizona. You got plenty of people in this general area that would love to have you. You know, you can go house hunting. House hunting, house house hopping and everything. You know, we got you.
Gonna go mouse hunting, not house hunting here in a little while. But no, and I want to be clear to, you know, the SFL Nation, our community, that this isn't anything like what we were dealing with in season 19. You know, that was just structural damage, disorganization, poor company. You know, we're talking about a different company, something that's not anyone's fault. It's not, you know, it's not our internet service provider. It's not anybody. It's, you know, it's a smaller company, and they close operations for the holidays, and I can't be mad at that. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not their fault. They didn't do a poor install. Their internet isn't going out. I'm just, you know how it is, Ashley. Every once in a while in life, you just kind of deal with a pest, and until the pest is eradicated, sometimes they give you trouble. But we're gonna get that wire covered and figure out what's chewing on that thing, and get a move on with season 20 soon enough.
Gotcha. Good stuff. You know, I was gonna ask you, you know, what was going on with you since our last, you know, get together. Anything new happened besides you getting married? You're so happy about that. We all happy to know that Lexus is a beautiful and wonderful person for putting up with somebody like you. But what else is new? You know, what's been going on with you on the personal front that you'd like to share?
Well, when was the last time that we sat down for a one-on-one?
After you got married, I think.
Okay, I wish I was seeing you in person right now, but you know, we gotta do what we gotta do.
Exactly.
Goodness, you know, things have been good. I think the one difference is, since we last spoke, Ashley, is I think when you take your loves, my loves, Alexis's loves, trying to think who else we should throw in that mix. Maybe Curtis's. Every single one of our teams has a losing record. It is just misery out there, isn't it? So I'm joining you at the table. You are not alone anymore, Ash.
Yeah.
So that is something new. But you know, obviously, since I got married, moved again, and settled up shop a little further south, and had to deal with those internet issues that are well documented, and had to come out of that, and had to deal with some home issues as well. But my wife is doing wonderful things, and at her new job, and we're hoping that we can finally settle down here sometime soon, and stop the movement. I feel like a free agent in the SFL. Feels like every time I turn around, I'm going someplace else. But you know, you make sacrifices for the person you love, and I don't take it back for a second. What else? What else is new? I don't know, Ashley. Just been trying to keep this thing moving. It is. I tell people all the time, back in the day, you know, if our raft got a hole in it, we just buy another raft. No big deal. Now we got a cruise ship. That's how large the league is. And if the cruise ship needs repairs or is beyond repair, well, then we'd have to build a whole nother cruise ship. So the problems are a little bit more complicated to achieve or to fix, you know, when you're an entity of that size. So tough navigating, but you know, we're taking it one day at a time.
Exactly. And you know, you and I have been knowing each other for a while, and I've often told you that, you know, hold on one second. you and I have known each other for a very long time, and it is amazing to me how I've watched you grow, how I've watched you go through so much with the league. I mean, to the point where you wanted to give it up at one point, or you thought you may have to. And look what that's what perseverance gives you, right? Even though you had your trials and tribulations that definitely occurred, you were able to, find a way to make it through. And now look what you have, So, all right, I knew that. I knew that you were going to go far, and you still have a long way to go, sir. Long way to go.
Well, as long as you're here, it'll be a lot easier on me, Ash.
Hey, man, I got your back. I got your back. With internet or without internet, all right?
You got to keep community in line when I'm gone.
Well, I'm going to do my best, but sometimes, woo! Woo! The patience get tested, but it comes with the territory. I have children. Indeed, not just Eddie though, but But it's been a good time. We can talk about that if you want to in a little bit. But what were some high points for you for season 19?
Some high points. That's where we're starting.
That's right.
I really think that not just what the convention symbolizes and represents, but being able to be there and not feel so alone in terms of partnerships, right? To get to meet people from Next Level Sports, shake their hands, work with them, work alongside them, do this together with someone. I thought was a really big step for us. Learn some lessons, learn kind of some what it takes to kind of get to the next step of growing this company. And it wasn't perfect. We had plenty of hiccups that some could have been avoided, some couldn't have been. But at the end of the day, any season that has a convention that brings people together and has everyone having a good time is a positive, and that was certainly certainly something really cool. One of the things that I took away from that weekend is that getting to introduce people in the tunnel for starting lineups was just, that's the definition of fun, Ashley. I mean, that's just pure joy doing that. Which is a shame that Eddie rolled his ankle because he couldn't do it. But it was just so exciting to give that moment, to give that feeling of you truly are about to step foot on that field and play. And so that was, whether we ever get to do that again or not, that was a highlight for sure. I don't know how many hours BDG Hollywood played poker that day, but incredible. I mean, that was a highlight to see him having a good time and to meet new people and really just try, just try to do something that we have not done. And so that was really fun. It's a moment in time that will be cherished, and who knows, could be we could talk about that one day as kind of the turning point of something bigger.
Right.
So that was obviously a major positive. I would say another major positive was our postseason, which was full of competitive and exciting games, mm-hmm. which we had not had for a couple seasons. We had we'd kind of taken some lumps with some big blowouts and some really just ugly games that when you get to the playoffs, you expect a little bit more than that. But we saw Sioux Falls squeak out at one point and then against Houston. We saw Mexico City push Baltimore in the second half before ultimately that game got out of hand. We saw Cliff Allen with the miracle record-tying field goal in a game that proved to be, that is an instant classic football game. And, obviously the championship was actually something that went underrated. It's my fault. Should have known. Should have said something on the broadcast. That was the first overtime SFL championship game in 19 seasons. It had happened in SFLm, but it had never happened in the SFL, and that prompted me to realize that we need a championship page on our website that details every championship game and chronicles, what went down, who the big playmakers were, who the MVPs were, who, highlights from the game, and all the, just kind of a time capsule of these big moments, because, we really should be honoring these teams, these dynasties, these games, and how they all played out. So that is under development, and will be up before season 20 starts. So as part of kind of our season 20 festivities. So I thought the postseason was a real big highlight for us. Lots of positive compliments on the adjustment to the scoreboard going up top, and just kind of giving things a fresh look, and so that helped my enthusiasm. Of course, positivity helps anyone's enthusiasm about anything. So I thought that was really great. So I really believe kind of the start and the finish were really, really exciting, and that's where the positives lie for me.
All right. Now let's flip that a little bit.
A lot of it.
Okay. What were some low points for you for season 19, and what would you have done differently in hindsight?
Okay, first, I want to quick jump back to positives.
Okay.
We got 4 new teams rolling.
That's right.
That's hard to do.
That's right.
We added 24 games to the schedule. Minnesota made the playoffs, and gave DC a pretty good push until the early stages of the fourth quarter. It's tough building teams from scratch. And as time has gone on, that job only gets harder. So as of this phone call, seems to have retained almost everyone from their team, and they had the worst record last season. So, I think that.
I'm sorry. Say that team again. You kind of cut out on me.
Seattle.
Yeah.
Has almost retained their entire team as of this phone call, and they had the worst record last season. And so to see something happening like that, right, with a team that struggled on the field last season, gives you hope for season 20. And it's tough building teams from scratch, and it's only gotten tougher as rosters have continued to grow. So kudos to those 4 teams for getting things moving and getting new stories started. So now back to the negatives. Obviously, production was incredibly challenging for me. Imagine, my job, my duties here in the SFL. The entire week is work. It's prep, essentially, for the next week, especially when you get into regular season mode. Off season's totally different. Every week is different, right? Because you've got different events, different things going on in the off season. And so for me, every day feels a little different. But once you get into regular season, there's really not a lot of news happening. There's really not a lot of one-off events. It's all very structured. And so my weeks turn into prep and meetings in response to whatever happened the week before, right? Whether that be some kind of game or some kind of technical issue or some kind of playbook issue or whatever the case may be, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, in the regular season, my reward for all the hard work is the games themselves. And producing these games and, just getting to see good football, good high quality football that our teams, put on the field week in and week out. Hard to enjoy the fruits of your labor when no one can see them. there's no more deflating feeling than putting all of that work and effort into to getting something ready to show, hundreds of people, and then them not being able to see it. Soul crushing is an accurate description of that. And to not only have to deal with that for 1 week, but to have to deal with that for 2 months out of the season, and then to, the only recourse of temporarily fixing the problem is moving operations to a different state, was soul crushing and tiring. And if it wasn't for all of our players in the league and all of our teams who care, who give a damn, I'm not sure that the season would have finished, because where's the motivation, right? The motivation is in the people, and I certainly felt that weight all season long, and it's that was very frustrating. On top of that, right, before any of this even happened, Matt Wilson passing away was devastating to our community, to my Dags, myself to a lesser degree personally, because Mike has known Matt for 30 years, that was really defeating. And then Leonard Butler Sr. passing away a few weeks later was a double whammy to Gerald Smith personally, who Leonard played for, and then obviously Gerald was a part of Mike Dags and Matt Wilson's broadcast crew, so that compiling, and then having to deal with all of those issues as well, was very hard. It was probably the most challenging experience that I've had trying to produce the SFL since season 5, and beyond, or before, I should say, when I really was not in a good situation during any season, quite frankly, whether that be due to technology or inexperience. So it was just very difficult. And fortunately, the playoffs and the championship game was, I finally did get a reward, right? I finally did feel like the clouds were evaporating or leaving the horizon line, and you could finally see the sun again. So it was tough. What would I do differently? Honestly, Ashley, nothing. There was really nothing to do. There was, for those that don't know, when I initially contacted the fiber company in my new town about getting coverage, they said that they did not service my area. It turned out that because a street name had changed and it was not updated in a database, that they did in fact service my street. And over time, due to desperation of all the other issues, circled back to that, and discovered that. I wish I would have gone in to the office sooner, but at the end of the day, you just kind of trust what people are telling you is the truth. You're not gonna. What am I gonna do? Like stalk these people for weeks to tell them that they're wrong?
Right.
That's just not normal behavior. Someone tells you they don't service you. What are you gonna do? So it. Outside of that, you can't know what you don't know, and we tried very hard for 2 months to fix the problems that we had. Constant technicians, constant constant equipment changes, constant equipment upgrades, troubleshooting, tech support, over the phone, in the company, outside of the company, all sorts of things. I just couldn't get it to work. Never really figured out what the problem was, but it was obviously the internet service provider. And I obviously could not continue to jeopardize people's entertainment dollar for the sake of me trying to figure out a puzzle. And so, but I really, when I look back at it, a lot of hardship, a lot of pain, a lot of anger, a bit of depression, but I knew all along it really wasn't my fault. It was my responsibility, but it wasn't my fault. There's nothing I can do about that. All I can do is try and fix it. Ultimately, I think a lot of people think fault and responsibility are the same thing. It's not. Just because it's not my fault doesn't mean that it was not my responsibility, which is why I moved headquarters to Texas temporarily to ensure that I was being responsible to my customers, even though it wasn't my fault. Because I could have just sat there and said, well, it's not my fault. Just throw my hands up and, blamed everyone else and not take accountability for it. But ultimately, I am accountable for not being able to produce a signal, and I have to take responsibility for that, whether it is my fault or not. So I wouldn't do much different. I have learned a lesson from it, which is to, in life, press a little harder for things that are important. And I certainly will do that moving forward. So yeah, I mean, it was largely, in terms of the negatives, it was largely a season of bad luck. Just out of our hands. No one can control, people leaving this world. No one can control, flukes in programming or wiring or things like that. If they're happening, they're happening, and we just got to take it in stride. So it's interesting that you asked, what will we change? Because I really don't know that we could have. Just was about a bad luck, Ashley. I really believe that. And hopefully, once we catch the mouse or whatever it is, because that's just been how things have been going, then everything will be fine. Because that's been really the only thing we have been having to deal with for the last couple of months, which makes me very blessed. Makes the league very blessed as well.
All you gotta do is start singing to it. Being the two of us will hurt no one. And then he'll come out, and then you can catch him.
I wasn't sure where you were going with that. I think I would scare it further on the ground if I started to, if I took that strategy.
Well,
maybe I needed some kind of snake and flute or something to draw it out. I'm not really sure how. But
I think that only works on snakes, Cam. I think that's only on snakes. I'm not sure.
Doesn't pull the rat out. I pull the snake. Involved either. So yeah, we're gonna leave that to professionals. And we'll figure it out soon enough.
Indeed, but what you were saying. It could be looked at as bad luck. You can also look at it as opportunities to gain strength.
Right.
Because it takes strength to deal with what occurred. It takes strength to be able to deal with the passing of our brothers. It takes strength to deal with finding a solution and intelligence, finding a solution instead of dwelling in the problem. Because you could have, like you said, threw your hands up and been like, you know what? I guess the season's over with, but
right.
You didn't do that. You found a way to make it work because you know that there are people that depend on you, for this product. I mean, I've told you on the phone, I've told you many times that I think that this league does so much for people in different ways. It could be keeping people out of trouble. It could be, holding a relationship together. It could be doing a whole bunch of things. So I think it's about perspective and how you view things. Yes, you did have to travel to Texas, to make sure we had the quality product that you're used to giving us. But at the same time, I think a lot of people appreciated you for that because you didn't have to do that. You did it though, because you have a love for all of us and you have a love for what you do ultimately. So, it's just it's a perspective thing, Cam. But
absolutely.
So you touched a little bit about our sponsors with Next Level, but I want to know, how important is it for you to cultivate and nourish the partnerships and the sponsorships that you have for the league?
Well, I think that depending upon the what you're trying to accomplish, depends on the relationships that you want to have in life. I think as a person who has now been going at it on his own for 2.5 years in terms of operating a company, as a person that is the sole full-time employee of the entity that has 700 customers and that deals with its whole set of other challenges. I think that being alone is much harder than building relationships and getting some help, getting some guidance, getting some resources. And I think that's, when I look at people that we've partnered with, I think that, that's been important in all cases. We haven't really seen the relationship grow with ESTV as we have on Next Level just yet. But patience is a virtue. And there's a lot happening with ESTV that's really, really exciting. Eric Yoon, their CEO, who has, become a good partner of mine. He's really got a great vision, and we're happy to be a part of that vision as that comes together. And these people are valuable. I mean, what if a guy like Eric knows someone in the virtual reality space, or knows someone in the video game space, or knows someone over at 2K, or has a LA studio to do live drafts from and make our league better, has distribution platform, has connections at Vizio, or whatever the case may be. And sometimes with these partnerships, it's not all about money. It's not all about revenue or getting that bag or anything like that, right? It's about building relationships, through 97 Sports and Zollner and Laser and Sector 6 and all of these different entities that we have partnered with over the years. You're building relationships and seeing, in a way, what sticks, what doesn't. We've seen, many things come and go for one reason or another, but you can't be afraid to fail, and it's never a bad thing to make a new friend. And there's plenty of people that I've come across over the years that you would never hear about, because ultimately we didn't end up doing anything with them. But doesn't mean that conversation, doesn't mean that meeting wasn't valuable. Something that people don't know, something that isn't talked about very much, but in honor of our 20th anniversary, it's good to talk about things like this. Back when I was in the Dallas area, there was a motion graphics designer who had done some of the biggest projects in sports, and he had done a redesign of the NFL on CBS that ultimately was not picked up by CBS.
Okay.
And so I saw that as an opportunity to go and see if they would do the SFL. Now, keep in mind, this is before any team had official branding. So we were talking about not only branding the SFL and branding the broadcast package of the SFL, but also branding the teams themselves through this partnership. They actually flew from California to Dallas, and we actually did the championship game live on locations for the first time from MediaTek Institute. I don't know if you recall this partnership. This was around the time of the first convention, which was also in Dallas. And we had a connection to that institute, and were able to utilize some space and do a live show. And so we welcomed the design company out from California, and we talked about what it would take to brand the SFL and brand our production and brand our presentation. And ultimately, we were too young, too early. But that relationship taught us so much. It taught us what big business can look like, what we can achieve, and ultimately it didn't pan out. But now I have connections in that space. Now I could send someone a message. Hey, do you remember me? Right? And start new conversations and new journeys. Another interesting thing that we did that never saw the light was, I don't know if you remember, you had a team down there in Arizona, but do you remember the Alliance of American Football, actually? AAF. It was around, they didn't even finish a season. It was around, it was 2019, I think, that they did this. You remember this? Arizona Hotshots? San Antonio Commanders? Any of that ringing the bell?
No. Well, the Commanders, maybe.
They had a TV deal with CBS, and it was really the first spring football league that had really tried in about 7 years, right?
Okay.
So it was exciting. People were really excited about it. They had 8 teams all across the country, all this stuff. What's interesting about how our parents crossed with AAF is they actually hosted their draft at HyperX Arena, where we were.
Wow.
Conventions. And this is, we're talking about an entity that was working with CBS. They broadcasted that quarterback draft on CBS Sports Network. I believe, I think Kurt Warner was there as an analyst, right? And so we were right in the same space that big entities have been, and they're not the only one, but obviously an interesting football connection.
Definitely.
Anyway, that comes and goes, and a couple of years pass, and we're talking with, of course, we're partnered with ATM Music. They're our presenting sponsor to, and we have license rights to some track music that was produced by the same people as the same composers that did Sunday Night Football, for those that don't know, right? And so at the time, our contract was close to being up, and we were in a renegotiating phase. And so anytime that happens, whether it's with television or a sponsorship or anything like that, you have to reevaluate things, right, Ashley?
Exactly.
You have to just see what you want to do. Well, I thought it was interesting that the AAF had this pretty great theme song that was built specifically for the AAF, but the AAF didn't exist anymore. It was bankrupt. It was dead. And so I actually contacted the composer of that music, and I asked him, would he ever want to resurrect that theme, but in our league? And he needed to look in to see the contractual obligations with CBS, things like that. Ultimately, APM and the SFL renewed its partnerships, and so we didn't really need to revisit it. But these are the type of, what if he made a song for us, right? Instead, he's obviously done it for another pro sports league. He could do it for us too. Now you build a connection, relationship, and you see where that takes you. So ultimately, there are partnerships that could have happened that never actually do happen. And those are valuable as well. So really it's about relationships and growing the visibility and distribution of the product more than it is about, we're desperate to make a buck. We're willing to just sell our soul for, big game sponsors and things like that. So it's one of the more exciting things for me as the commissioner of this league to kind of cultivate those relationships and push the boundaries. How far can we go with this? How insane can we treat this concept?
Exactly.
Everybody else out there that's doing anything with video games as as an amateur or as a small company, they're just doing their own things. They're doing it on their own, and I don't find as much joy in that. I really do want to make this a reality in as many ways possible. So that's fun stuff.
Indeed, and that's some good good tips. I actually do remember the multimedia group that we were working with, the Technical Institute. I do remember that because I came in season 12. So I believe
it was just before. I think it was season 10 or 11, I think.
Right, but I guess you guys were still in partnership when I got here, because I do remember seeing that on the website. I do remember seeing that like towards the end when we have all our sponsors. I remember seeing them specifically. So yeah, I remember that. AAF, not vaguely, but that's some good stuff, Cam. That's some really good stuff. You probably should use that as like a trivia question for the next convention. But we're gonna talk about that too.
That's damn good. You could be taking people's names down at that convention. Make sure you give them a talking to about not listening.
Okay, exactly. Oh, you didn't know that? You see, if you would have watched my show, you would have knew it. But that's why your team lost. Oh. But so this is the last question I actually have about sponsorship. How difficult is it for you to actually find sponsors that will work with the SFL? I mean, when you try to explain this to people to try to help you out, they're looking like, so what's the SFL? And then you're like, okay, how do you explain that in 10 seconds?
Well, I think that we have two major challenges. The first major challenge is that we don't have a regional or local footprint, but a global footprint. Obviously very much based in the United States, but still everyone is spread all over the place.
True.
So we really can't go to an entity that is local or regionalized and say, boy, do we have a deal for you, right? And so that limits our reach, and that comes with time. Canton's doing an excellent job of laying down local roots, local ties, trying to connect their organization with the community in which it serves. But that in the SFL's lifetime is very much in its infancy stage, and that's okay. Rome wasn't built in a day. I think we are very much on track for things that we want to accomplish as a league. So no harm, no foul there, but it is a challenge. And the second challenge is just the limitations that we have with the game itself. And if not for this particular game, the aging of alternative football products really is a challenge for us, and that challenge grows every day when it comes to sponsorships, because sponsorships want to be able to look at the product and see an emerging market. They want to see something that looks cool, that's cutting edge, that is ahead of its time, right?
Right.
It's not necessarily us, right? We're kind of as time continues to march on, we're trying to keep the clock from not moving in a way, just because of the limitations that we do have. with older titles. But at the end of the day, people get involved with the SFL because they see opportunity. So it's our challenge to showcase to them what that opportunity may be, whether that's reaching a community of like-minded people, whether that is bringing people to a convention space, whether that's getting them national exposure to help their marketing campaign at a price point that is far less than what you may pay to be on Sunday Night Football or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So the I guess the needle and the thread, right? The needle hole is small, but there's still opportunity there, and it's all about finding the right partners. And honestly, Ashley, the right partners, they get it a lot faster than partners that don't understand. You go into these meetings and you try to explain to them, and you spend half the time just trying to explain to them what it is, right? And if they're not really in tune with the simulation world or the video game world or that idea of getting to be something that you've never been before, if you're talking to someone who's never really felt that or been in that space, after 10 seconds, they're probably not going to get it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So you kind of know early on where there may be a fit, where there may not be a fit. And also, too, what can we get out of that partnership as well? Do they have something? Do they have a kind of technology? Do they have something that can enhance and help our community? Right? Is there something there that actually benefits us too, just as much as it benefits them? And most of the time, those conversations do not mutually benefit entities, but sometimes they do, and those are exciting times. When that stuff comes together. Indeed.
Now, I'm going to touch a little bit on some specific things that happened this season. Just to kind of quiet the minds of people that may have some issues still with some of these things. Is there anything that can be done about the glitches that sometimes occur in the game, like what happened with Louisiana versus Florida, or even with Arizona versus Baltimore in the championship game?
Well, I'll start with the championship game, as you called it a glitch. Is that right? Are you sticking with that?
Oh, well, since we talked, I know that's not what happened.
I'll send you a screenshot so that because we haven't necessarily put out any kind of public release on it or anything.
Right.
I'll send you a screenshot so you can have it for the show.
Okay.
But if I can figure out how to get it to you. with the rat shoe that we talked about earlier. But yeah, in the championship game, you're talking about the face mask penalty in overtime. We got a screenshot of it in postgame. It was a really close call. We go into the replay after the game to try and get a shot of what it was. Most of the time, the calls end up actually being correct. It just didn't look like that in real time. Every once in a while, it's like, oh, that's kind of a bad call. But which you're going to get in sports. But in terms of the championship game face mask, according to NFL rules back in 2007, which is the era that this coding is from, and it could still be the same today. Quite frankly, Ashley, I'm not really sure, but we don't look up current rule books, because they're kind of irrelevant. So back then, a change of possession occurs when a player establishes possession and feet down. And in the championship game, as the face mask was being pulled, the interception had been made, but the feet had not come down. And so what the game is looking at is, has possession changed? And since it had not changed, that's why the penalty was not applied after the interception. Because technically the interception, while it has occurred because the player has the ball, possession has not been established at that time, which is why that penalty gets tacked on to the end of the play and the interception is wiped away. So that particular case, in fact, turned out not to be a glitch or anything nefarious or anything like that. It's just a very unfortunate call for Arizona, very unfortunate situation for Arizona, and that's just football. In regards to Florida and Arizona, or I'm sorry, Florida and Louisiana in the Week 14 game, we did a lot of work in the offseason to really kind of hammer down exactly what is happening in this situation. And we actually took to the last version of a 2K game, the ESPN 2K5. And we actually utilized a mode in that game called Scenario Mode, which allowed us to find out specifically at every point in the game when backups come in, based on the score and time. And we were able to not only establish between the scores of 16 and 34 points, and between the time of 4.5 minutes and 2 minutes and 5 seconds, when exactly backups are automatically entering the games. And so we did some rigorous testing on that. What you have seen twice in SFL history is that with 2 minutes and 5 seconds to go in a 16-point game, the starters are pulled. But in All-Pro, and this is only an All-Pro issue, the starters never return if they leave with 2:05 to go in a 16-point game, because starters do not come back in All-Pro sub 2 minutes. If something occurs to where it triggers the starters to come back in, so for example, if the starters leave when you're up by 21, but the other team scores before the 2 minute and 5 second mark, and they've cut the deficit to 14. Well, what that does is it resets the code. So the code is looking for that score and that time. So if you're down by, or if you are up by 21 points with 3 minutes to go, the backups will come in. But if you're only up by 14 points with 2 minutes and 15 seconds to go, the starters will come back in. Because with 2 minutes and 15 seconds to go, you need to be trailing by at least 17 points in order for the backups to be in, right? So this is how you will see the starters actually return to the game. But once you get beyond the 2 minute and 5 second threshold, there's no coding for starters re-entering. So what we saw with Florida and Louisiana, and in one particular case back in season 17, is that they just so happened to be up by 16 points with 2:05 to go. The starters are pulled, the starters never re-enter, and Florida was able to come back and win that game with Louisiana starters on the bench. We also looked into how to try to manipulate the depth chart in order to get the starters to come back in, and realized and recognized that because of the code set forth in the game, it is a near impossible task, because every 5 seconds it is looking for that code and is looking for those scoring marks. And at 2:05, if you're up by 16, that is the end of the mark, and it's always going to come back to, were you up by 16 with 2:05 to go? It's always going to come back to that. So we're talking about something that is hard coded into a game. If we had a controller, if this was a user v user league, then obviously there's something to be done. But when you're talking about a simulation league, you are, for better or worse, at the mercy of the game's coding itself. I still believe that the coding that is coded to replicate football is far and away more successful at producing a simulation football product than a bunch of people that just want to do anything to win. I 100% still believe that, but there are drawbacks to that as well when you lose control. So ultimately, the owners had an opportunity to put a fix in place. There were a couple of things that were proposed. Some things needed further testing. Other things were pulled from the ballot due to lack of support. And ultimately, we are left with a better understanding of this backup coding, but we are still left with the small percentage chance that if you're up by 16 points with 2:05 to go, that you could blow that game. Now, there are some things that teams can do from a personnel standpoint to make that less likely. For example, if you had more defensive backs, it's just kind of like having two running backs, right, Ashley?
Right.
It's like insurance policies.
Right.
And if teams have more cornerbacks or more safeties or more people in those positions, then potentially it's not severe. But at the same time, why is a team going to spend salary cap on a 0.001 percentage chance of losing? That's a little crazy, right? So it's understandable that teams would say, well, I'm going to roll the dice and take the risk. The reality is that this is an all-pro problem. 2K5, the game that we did use scenario mode for, showed improvement in that way, because the starters do in fact come back in if the deficit gets to a one-score game. And so that's something that obviously that coding just did not make it. It either didn't make it to All-Pro, or because of the way, and this is what I believe actually, because All-Pro's depth chart is very unique, because it's just a 42-man roster, that coding is just not effective, and is defective with the 42-man roster. It just simply does not work with that roster. And so we're seeing that gap by it essentially being eliminated. So is there anything we can do? Yes. Is it something that we can 100% fix? Not if you're using the game in which has that code. And so that's something to take a look at in future seasons. But for those wondering, in season 20, right, if it does happen and you do lose a game with all your backups in, that loss will count, and you just had bad luck and ultimately needed one more point to not blow it. Because it does happen to other teams and they do pick up the win, and it's no big deal. But two teams have fallen ill to a very, very tiny, another, thread through needle kind of situation. And at this point, the teams decided that, and the league decided that the best course of action, season 20 and beyond, until something else comes along that is better, is to just continue and live with the reality that this is what simulation sports are. And human interference sometimes is not only discouraged, but also pretty impossible as well.
Gotcha.
Just gotta live with it sometimes. So
just a little point that I wanted to kind of touch on just a little bit. When you mentioned that you kind of felt like it's irrelevant to look at the NFL's rules as of right now, because it's irrelevant. But you referred to 2007's rules in the ruling of that game. Is it fair to say you probably should not rely on any NFL rules? Or if you are going, or if that is a necessity, would you be willing to look at the rules that are in place now so we can be more up to date?
It's not really about utilizing the rules and saying that they're law. It's more about trying to understand the AI in which was coded.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
It does.
So it's not for me to say that I agree that the possession had not changed. It's not for me to say that I agree or disagree that ruling is correct. What I'm mostly looking for is what happened a bad call, or is it explainable through, the coding at that time?
Okay.
And if the rule, if they coded penalties as penalties occurring after, because we've seen, Ashley, I'm sure you can recall, right, an interception happens, and during the return, there's a block in the back.
Yes.
Right? The team keeps the ball, but they bring the touchdown back, or they bring it back to where the penalty was, or whatever. They show a replay, yada, yada, yada.
Mm-hmm.
It's obviously in the game that a penalty can occur after a change of possession, because we've seen it before. So really, it's more about trying to understand, well, why did it rule that way, right? Okay. And it ruled that way because of what we found. But looking for why an AI was coded in 2007 in a 2022 rulebook isn't really going to help us, right? It's not going to solve the mystery. And the mystery is, what was the game thinking in those moments? And as long as we can understand, or at least just simply say, well, that was a bad call. Now we need to look into whether this is, whether this happens all the time, or whether this just happened because it's a bad call. I mean, officials can make mistakes too. Mm-hmm. In games. But there's a difference between it happening once and it happening a bunch of times and it being incorrect, right?
Right.
There's a difference in that. And so for us, it's not really about using the rules that we then adapt in a rule book. It's more about, well, this is how the game was coded and this is why. For example, we don't know exactly what the logic is with the feet. I'm pretty sure it's 1 foot in between the end zones, and it's 2 feet in the end zone. I'm pretty sure, but I'm not confident because I've seen some wrong calls.
Right.
So exactly. It's like, okay, well, what exactly is the rule so that we can understand the rule, right? Okay. So we can understand the coding, because there's nothing that's laid out for us. There's nothing that's black and white that the game just tells us, well, this is how it is. There's not. So we kind of have to piece it together ourselves so that people can at least feel like there's an explanation to what happened. And quite frankly, sometimes there isn't an explanation of what happened. And that's life. And people have to move on and get over it, because 50% of people lose. And sometimes there's just bad calls. And as long as the league has properly implemented team strategies and rosters, right, to the best of its ability, despite whatever All Pro throws at us, that game's going to count, whether teams like it or not. Whether you get a face mask penalty, or whether the foot was in, or whether the fumble, the knee was down, or he got the first down but he didn't get the first down, doesn't matter. That's football, and that is kind of the point of the whole league, is that you can't control everything. And this is a prime example of that. At the end of the day, it's more about just trying to gain an understanding of the game more than it is about adapting 15-year-old rules.
Gotcha. Okay. So, I'm trying to see which one do I want to ask first. Okay. So, you kind of touched on this earlier in your explanation when we were speaking, but Are there any changes that you will be making to the online portal for season 20?
We have a list that we've requested, whether that be fixes or whether that be additions. It's up to our programmer as to, when he can find the time. And we're obviously not his only project or his only client, and to get those things done. So, there's plenty of improvements and fixes that we want to make. There's a list of about 16 different things. Some things as big as, getting secure ball properly unlocked as a progressible stat for wide receivers, to small things like us being able to change the name on the back end when it's misspelled. There's big things, there's small things, but the list is out there, and now it's just a matter of when when those changes are going to be implemented. I can't give a timetable because there isn't one. But we'll continue to kind of fix some bugs and solve the little things and try to make things a little bit smoother, in time. But for the most part, the portal is quite pleasant from the old days before it, season 15 and earlier.
I remember.
That had become so painful. Back then, I remember specifically, Ashley, 440 players. And I remember kind of hammering that number because, that's what we were dealing with in terms of manual checking contracts and doing progression and entering all of that stuff in a file and all that other stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So if you put it in perspective, the league has grown its number of players since the portal came in by about 33%. We have gained over 200 new players since the portal was established. And remember, the portal was built with an effort to make sure that we could continue to grow, because we essentially put our foot in the ground and said, look, if we cannot automate this process, we can't grow anymore. We're tapping out, right? This is as far as we can take it, right? And so when you consider that we've added, over 200 players and we'll continue to, grow in every way we can through the portal, it was a good investment for our league, and it has tremendously helped. And now it's just, little stuff, just getting things to work a little bit better. So it all comes in time. We're pretty patient, and until then, we'll continue to, clean things up that aren't working 100%.
Gotcha. Subscription prices. What do these fees actually cover, and why do they increase?
Well, as the league grows, it becomes harder to maintain. There are more events. There are, there are more staff that contributes to the league. It becomes more labor intensive, and it puts a strain on the resources that it takes to operate the league. Most people don't realize that we have a cost associated with producing television. You have to send a signal to two different places at the same time. And to do that, you need software that isn't free and that isn't cheap, right? So anytime you're dealing with a product like that, there's things to be paid. Obviously, portal upgrades and upkeep. There's money that needs to be set aside for that. Staff, as I mentioned, and just simply the fact of keeping up with everything. if you add 4 new teams, you add, what is that? 92 new accounts who need customer support, customer service, that need to be created, looked after, cared for, equipment, all this other stuff, right? Adjustments that need to be made manually through the portal, yada, yada, yada. And it is the cost of doing business. It's the cost of being a bigger league and a higher in demand product. If only 200 people wanted to be in the SFL, then we'd only have 200 people, but we don't. And, more and more continue to join the league every day. Our minor league class is once again over 100. And all of that needs upkeep too. So I think it's when talking about subscription prices and them going up, I didn't even mention inflation. The league has electrical bills, internet bills, right? Things that cost money, and as cost of living continues to increase for everyone, so does the cost of doing business, right? With that being said, since I went full time 2.5 years ago, I have not taken a raise. I've not been able to get a raise. I would love a raise, but we just have not had enough money. But also, too, it's very important to note that the conventions are a huge part of our budget, and that is something that the community sort of gets back when we do these type of events, social events. Just in the last couple of years, the league has invested over $15,000 in conventions and social gatherings and things that I find incredibly valuable to building the bonds of our community. And I understand that not everyone has been able to reap those benefits. However, that you could say the same for anything else you pay for. Sometimes for example, if you pay taxes for an elementary school in your area, you may not have children, so you are not reaping the benefits of that school. But if you did have children, then you would be, right? So there's a little bit of that going on as well, and then there's also the Netflix effect. Right? As the league continues to provide more content, how much content you consume depends on the person, right? If we're producing 400 events a year, but a person is only watching 12 or 24, as it were, because they're only watching their team, well, they're not getting near as much bang for their buck as someone who is watching 350 of those 400 events, right?
Gotcha.
So, all of those things factor into the necessities of raising prices and keeping up with the upkeep of the organization. And I always say, and I think I've said it on your show before, Ashley, if you do not feel like the amount of money that you are paying is worth the amount of money that you are paying, then you tell me that, because I respect that. If you don't feel like it's that valuable to you, then that's the best reason to not continue paying for anything. I'm not going to pay for Netflix if I don't feel like it is valuable to me at the price they're charging me. I'm not going to pay for Hulu. I'm not going to pay for cable. I'm not going to pay, anything if I don't feel like it's valuable to me. I'm not going to go out to eat and buy a $25 steak if I don't feel like it's worth $25.
Yeah.
It's the same for anything you choose to spend your money on. Oftentimes people say that they don't have the money. They may have the money for other things, but not the money for the SFL. They may have the money to keep their lights on, but they may not have the money for the SFL. But at the end of the day, they're making a choice. They would rather have power.
Right.
Power than the SFL. And I'd rather them have the power too.
Exactly.
I'd rather them have the electricity too. It's not that they don't have it. It's that they're choosing to spend their money in other places. And sometimes that means necessities. in life. And that's okay. That is totally respectable. But at the end of the day, the SFL has to continue to operate its company and do what it needs to do that. So, we're always looking for ways to accomplish and achieve that. And when push comes to shove and things need to go up, they just have to go up.
Got it. I mean, I'm glad that you explained that for those that maybe didn't understand quite why, there are subscriptions, why, these prices are in fact in place. So hopefully that brings a little bit more, I don't know if comfortability is a word, but, people are they have a little bit more knowledge and understanding as to why things happen the way they do. So
I think one thing, Ashley, too, of note is because we are all people and we identify as people, team owners are individuals. Mm-hmm. People see me, the CEO of the company, talking to them in a general chat room, right? It's a little bit different. Netflix is an entity. Mm-hmm. They're a figurehead. You have no idea. You're not talking to any person.
Right.
Netflix, the entity, is just telling you, here's the new price. And it's a lot easier to accept a thing giving you bad news than a person giving you bad news. Mm. The reality is that we are also an entity, but everything is just a little bit more personal. And the SFL is very personal to people. I have no personal attachment to Netflix at all. There's nothing on there that attaches me to Netflix. It's just entertainment. It's just stuff, But SFL entertainment is about the customer. Like, it literally talks about them, and so there's a personal connection. So people feel personal when the league raises prices or makes a ruling on a call in a game or decides whether or not to replay something because of a power outage. It all feels very personal to them. Every decision that our entity makes, person. Every decision Netflix makes or Twitter makes or whatever is not personal. They're an entity. So it doesn't affect people as much. So that's something that the SFL has to, whether it's fair or not, have to deal with. Because we're going to get way more flack and criticism, but we will also get, way more direct praise, depending upon the feelings of the customer. And it's hard to handle, some days for me, but I also have to understand that their feelings are not personal to me specifically. Mm-hmm. Because if it was up to me, everybody would just be able to enjoy the product for free. But I don't speak for me. I speak for the business, speak for the company. And so, with that being said, the company needs money to operate. And that's where it comes from. So.
And, that kind of breaks off into the next question I have was, and you kind of answered it even with your response to that one. And I'm wondering, what makes the SFL different from any other sim league that you can join for free?
Well, I think that any league out there, simulation or not, I think offers up some kind of value.
Right.
They do something that engages you in some way. To what level that you are being engaged and to what end of quality that you're being engaged in depends on the league and what it does well, and depends on the dedication and the people that exist within it. There are many leagues, simulation or not, that everyone loves. And they love it for different reasons. And there may be somebody that does something much better than me, for example. I know that my strength is in my experience in sports media. And so I am going to run the SFL with that in mind. I'm going to build storylines. I'm going to present these games in the most professional way I can, and I'm going to make your game feel like it's a big deal, because I want it to be a big deal, because I believe that you deserve a big deal. Ashley Jackson deserves to make for her game to feel like it is a big deal, because if you don't feel like it's a big deal, then it doesn't really matter, does it?
Right.
And so I think other leagues and other entities out there have their own their own way of doing things. But if you are in a free league and you are not paying for anything, it is likely that that league will not be around for a long period of time, because people get older and people have different priorities in life. And when you are not operating with the customer in mind, with the customer first, which you do when they are a paying customer, right? Then I'm not going to San Antonio to do games. Why would I do that? Right? Nobody pays for this. I don't make any money off of this. So why would I go to San Antonio to save a season? I wouldn't. I just put it down for a while. Why would I keep going if I was gonna start a family and have a child? I would have other obligations.
Yes.
I would have other things to take care of. I would have to put the hobby down, and I would have to go do something else. What happens if I lost my job and now I needed a way to pay my bills, and I couldn't just do this free thing anymore because I had to go and get 2 jobs to make ends meet, or whatever the case may be. So anytime you're dealing with an entity that is not asking for your money, they are also not asking for they're also not making a promise that you're going to be their number one priority. Ultimately, the people that are operating the league will make themselves the number one priority when necessary. Because you have to. You have to in life. That doesn't make them bad people. It just makes them human. And so, the SFL and any other league that is charging something, is charging something because that is their commitment to the customer. You are paying me, therefore your dollar matters to me in a way that it wouldn't before, because I'm not just going to make a radical decision to just stop, because I have a commitment, to people. Now, obviously, if anyone had to just stop, you would do refunds, and that's the end of it, right? But ultimately, the mindset of me or anyone else in a similar position in any league, anywhere, is, well, I don't really want to do this today, but if I don't, there's going to be a lot of angry people. And so I'm not going to put myself in a position that's going to be detrimental to me or my reputation or the thing that I've worked so hard to build. I'm going to go out there and put my best foot forward every night, which is what makes it so frustrating when things that are out of my control go south and are wrong, or there's some kind of issue, because I don't want there to be, because I don't want to make people upset. That's not good for me. What's good for me is that my customer feels that they are getting an experience that they feel like is worth it to their time and to their money. So I think that is really the biggest difference. You can get the SFL created an amazing product back then. Incredible. I mean, we had post-game shows and talk shows and all sorts of stuff back then, and it was all for free. When I was in college, I already had another job. I didn't, I was 20 minutes from home. I didn't need, to do anything. But guess what? The league that was for free, and then of course the SFL, back when it was, it couldn't anymore. It got too big, and it got to be too much of a time suck, to where when you are in a relationship in life, you have a family in life, or whatever the case may be, if you're spending 40 hours a week on something and it's not making any money, that is 40 hours you are spending away from either your wife, your child, right, your work. And as everyone knows from growing older, the older you get, the less time you can spend on selfish things that make no money.
Right. Exactly.
You better, if you're going to have a hobby, you better keep it to a minimum. Or people are going to start wondering why you're spending so much time on this and not on other things. Life is about balance. And so, free products are great. They are often short-lived and life gets in the way. That's just the reality of it.
Good point. All right. So nice. I like that. Why is it important for you? Why is it important to you that our league is all inclusive?
I mean, why wouldn't I want every person on this planet to be a customer? Right? I don't want to get political. I don't want to get to a point where, we're telling people that they can't play. Why? I want every individual to be able to enjoy the league. It makes no sense to me to exclude people for any, particular reason, because at the end of the day, whatever happens in other people's lives don't concern us as long as they keep our community clean. You know what I mean?
Right.
If someone, leans a certain political way that is the total opposite of what you may be, if they don't have any reason to talk about it and bring it up and bring it in, put the agenda, so to speak, then how are they any different than any other person then at that point? It's just somebody trying to enjoy the SFL, which is why we take the stances that we take. The SFL simply does not stand for causes. It does not speak out for any specific purpose, causes, statements, stances. You won't see that from the SFL ever, because that is not our business. That is not our point. Our point is for people to enjoy the SFL. That is our point. And everything else is outside. It's extra. People, when you get to be someone like the NFL, for example, Ashley, what you say or don't say matters, because you dominate a landscape. You dominate a culture. You dominate a country. You're a global entity, right? And so sometimes when you're a global entity, you need to speak for good, because it is in your best interest to speak for good, right? For the SFL, the stakes are not that high. We would be taking ourselves way too seriously if we felt like the SFL's words carried weight. They carry no weight. 700 people out of 7 billion. We carry no weight. We are nothing, right? Let's let life handle itself outside, and let's let the SFL be what the SFL is. A football league and a place where people should be able to go and celebrate the individuals behind the players for who they are in the SFL, which just means that you're an SFL player, right? And sure, you can speak your mind about things. You see it in the sports channel all the time, right? let's not get too serious. Let's not take ourselves too seriously, because we don't need any of that here. And we don't want any of that here. And that makes us inclusive, because it doesn't matter who you are, what you are, whatever, right? All that matters is that you want to be here and that you can abide by community code of conduct, that you can carry yourself as a mature individual, whether you are 15 or 50, doesn't matter. You just have to get along, right? And if you can get along, then you'll fit. And if you don't have anything nice to say, probably shouldn't say it at all.
And
it goes back to all the things your grandma taught you.
Right. Treat others how you want to be treated, all that good stuff, you know?
Just coexist. Just do that. Just figure that out. Because, you know, I have many friends inside and outside of the SFL who have totally different viewpoints about things in this world. Well, you know, political, religious, or not, or otherwise, you know? But I can still learn how to be friends with them. But they're also not all up in my face about it either. And that's why that can become toxic. Because people don't come to the SFL to hear other people's, you know, views on charged topics. It's not why we're here, right? We're here to be people and move on. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And don't judge, and treat others how you want to be treated, and move on. If you can't do that, then we don't want you here, you know? And that's just just kind of the long of it. But that's how I look at it. Why wouldn't I want to be inclusive? Why wouldn't I want everybody to be, you know, everybody to have an opportunity in this league? You know, so.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Owner rule changes. Passed the rule change that will pass with 87%. Owners will be O-line players only and cannot control more than one in a given season, instead of owners being O-line coaches and controlling multiple O-line players. Why was this brought into question, and was it because of the backups being on the field for odd times? Like, what actually spurred this on, that in your opinion?
I think it was a compromise. I think so. Anytime you see a rule change, you have to go back to why the original rule was instituted in the first place.
Okay.
So in the first place, when O-line coaches were established, the question was brought up, can owner players be offensive linemen? And what happened was owners rejected that and said, no, owners should not be offensive line players, because they felt like it would discourage user players, regular players, from becoming offensive linemen, because teams would not need them, because teams would just make owner players offensive line coaches. And if you're an offensive line coach who can control multiple offensive line players, well, then you don't really need offensive linemen, do you?
Right.
And at the time, there was there was the hope that the offensive line coaching rule would encourage more user players to become offensive linemen, because they would get to control multiple players. And so the original rule of owners can't be was to establish something that made it attractive for user players. I think where you saw the rule adapted this offseason was a compromise to that, in the sense that owners still felt like having offensive line coaches as owners would discourage, drafting offensive line players and discourage players from becoming offensive linemen. But they also see how defensive line play is far outpacing offensive line play. And simply put, teams that are able to achieve better offensive lines are seeing success on the field. It does matter, essentially. London had 4 offensive linemen, and they were the number 1 seed this year. Arizona, I believe, you have 3?
Yeah.
3 offensive linemen, you made the championship game. Now, it doesn't mean that anyone who doesn't have an offensive line with offensive line players can't play. Baltimore hasn't had an offensive lineman in 3 seasons, and they won the last 3 championships.
Mm-hmm.
So not everything is created the same. This is not a cookie-cutter league. But there are plenty of examples, like Jacksonville's record-setting offensive line in season 18, where the sack to pass attempts ratio was the best in league history.
Mm-hmm.
It was at an all-time low. So you have these examples of offensive line being successful, but the pool is just simply not enough to provide for the league as a whole. And so as a team owner, you look at that situation and you say, okay, we still want to be able to give user players the ultimate advantage. But we also understand that there is still a desperate shortage on the offensive line. And, defensive linemen, defenses have a much bigger advantage on the defensive front because of that. Now, my personal opinion is you can't give the defense enough advantages because our scoring is so high. Part of the reason why our scoring is so high, Ashley, is because the backups come in and blowouts. We get up with these bonus touchdowns that are put on these defenses, and then we look at our stats and we say, look, 11 teams average over 30 points a game. Well, they wouldn't if
the backups
scoring some of those garbage touchdowns either.
Right.
So you've got, and then you have to factor in, a lot of these pick sixes that are happening.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why have we seen an increase in pick sixes? Well, the pass protection hasn't been as good. And, quarterbacks, instead of taking a sack, are taking more risks, and they're throwing interceptions, bad interceptions, that are leading to pick sixes, which is leading to hikes in scoring.
Yeah.
And while all that is very exciting, ultimately, you are trying to build the best football product possible. And probably the best football product possible is the compromise that the owners made. And how many offensive linemen will get added this season is unclear, right? It could be 2, it could be 8, right? We just don't know. But at the end of the day, another thing that it does do is it potentially pulls owners out of more desirable positions and puts them in less desirable positions, which the league would obviously be in favor of as time goes on, because that does open up more spots and more opportunity for people who have never gotten to experience the SFL on the field before. So I think that it was, I think it passed because it was a good compromise. And that's, so that most of the time, that's when rules pass, when they're a pretty good compromise to either side of the coin. And so we'll see how that all plays out. But I think that's, to really understand where that rule came from, you have to understand how it all started. And, here's where we are today.
Well, thanks for that history lesson. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. I don't know if that's sarcasm or not, but I'm going to let it slide.
No, it is. Well, if you could see my face, then you knew it wasn't.
That's right. That's right.
But a few more questions for you. One, some of them are actually going to be kind of like a quick fire thing. These are suggestions from the suggestion box that came from the community that it would be interesting to hear your take live about it,
Okay. I will try to quick fire my best without insulting the suggestion by not giving it a full response.
Well, before we get into that, though, I mean, you can give it a response, but it's going to be a few of them, so I didn't know how.
Yeah.
A good question I thought of was, what are your expectations on how you would like the ownership group to interact with each other and with the community?
Well, my expectations are not being met. They have never been met, but they're obviously a very high bar as well. People have to remember that and I do too, that this is not the livelihood of team ownership either. They are trying to enjoy the league just as everyone else is, and they are trying to voice their opinions just as everyone else is. I think the issues come when owners identify themselves as fans first. I think that's where the problems lie, because it becomes more about the fans' opinion rather than the entity's statement. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It becomes about what you believe needs to be said from your mouth, more than it is about, well, how is the team going to represent themselves in these situations. So I think what you'll see over time in 2023 is the league's shift and focus to its teams and the owners who represent these teams to represent themselves as entities and not individuals, for the betterment of their organization and for the betterment of the league. And if you want to continue to to see yourself as an individual or as a quote fan first, then maybe ownership is not for you. But I think it's important that players in the league see these entities as entities, right? That this should not be personal. You should not have a personal issue with a team, right? With team leadership. That should not exist, right? I do not have, going back to the Netflix analogy, I do not have a personal issue with Netflix.
Right.
Why would I? There's no reason for me to have some beef with the CEO. But again, Netflix is not an SFL team. It's a totally different relationship, but there needs to be a more concentrated effort out of teams to represent the entity in which they represent when they speak and not themselves. And I think that that's where people get in trouble, because people build personal vendettas, personal attacks. They feel they take everything personally, and they choose to represent themselves and not the entity in which they represent, and claim that it is well within their right because they are an individual person. Well, if you are an individual person representing an entity, there needs to be a higher bar for that. And I have had plenty of teams call for that higher bar, to help elevate the status of their organization. And so we're going to work on that in 2023. It's not going to be something that's instituted, instantaneously or right away, or is even a definite in any way. But we're going to explore ways to build on those relationships and allow players to build relationships with teams before they build relationships with the people behind those teams.
Okay. Noted. All right, now this section is for suggestions from the community, and I did say quick fire, but if you want to elaborate on anything, because I mean some of these are going to be pretty cut and dry. I think if I know you, like I know you, it's going to be pretty cut and dry. But if you need to maybe explain something in detail, feel free to do so. I don't want you to think that I was going to try to rush you or.
You never rush me, Ashley.
No.
We all know that.
Listen, that's why we gonna be 3 hours into this thing.
Thanksgiving.
Exactly. All right.
Listen while you're digesting.
There you go. There you go. All right. So, Siege Falco from the Atlanta Swarm. And keep in mind, everybody, this is suggestions from the community in the suggestion box that we have, just for those that are not familiar with it. Siege Falco from the Atlanta Swarm asks, can we get a Rick meter in next season's HUD?
So we actually did have a Rick meter as part of our graphics one season. I want to say it was summer 2020 that we had it, and it leaned one way or the other. Right. It was fun. You know, it was fun to put it up on the screen, all that stuff. It's really a time thing. Of course, you remember what summer 2020 was. We all had time.
Plenty of time. Okay.
And so I think that's kind of where that stemmed from. I am certainly not opposed, and I will, look into it as we build out for season 20. At the end of the day, Rick does, what does he do? About 12 games a season, actually, and we have 178. So hard to justify building a graphic just specifically for something, but if we did, it would be for the Rick meter, no doubt about it.
Or you could, if we had a game of the week, which someone asked about that too, then maybe the Rick meter could be implemented for a game of the week or something like that. If maybe a featured game for that particular week.
We'll have to call down to Rick on the sidelines just randomly and just be like, so what is it, Rick? just have it. Like Ollie, the weatherman on Family Guy.
Yes.
Rick's like, lean Sioux Falls. I'm like, thanks, Rick.
Love it. That actually would be dope, though. Question from Alex Constantine, my defensive end for the Arizona Scorpions. He wants to know, is it possible to add a gaming or special interest channel in the SFL Discord?
I will defer to Rastelli on that one.
Okay.
There's a lot that goes into creating public channels, in the sense that when you create public channels for specific purposes, people who use those channels expect for them to be used in those specific purposes.
Mm-hmm.
When they're not being used in those specific purposes, then moderators have to clean up the channel. So the more public channels you have, the more cleanup you have to do. And so what we found over the course of SFL history is the sports channel manages to stay on topic, mainly because there's so much sports that how could you not be on topic?
Right.
Any other channel gets, even an SFL channel, gets quiet. And that's when conversations starts to spin in different directions. And then we come in and we say, okay, guys, let's get back on topic. And they say, well, the whole reason why we're talking about this is because we were on topic with this. And then it becomes an argument about who's on topic and who's not on topic. Very annoying.
Gotcha.
And quite frankly, the juice is not worth the squeeze when people just can't do what is asked. And I kind of look at it, Ashley, as a somebody's got to ruin it kind of situation. Why we can't have nice things situation, because someone somewhere is going to make it a problem. And it's just simpler for the SFL to operate without having to work, hold people's hands through chatter on a regular basis. We got too much to do and we don't have time for that. So that's why, in general, you don't see a lot of public channels. Mm-hmm. That is the reason, and that is the reason that you see the general and the sports channels that you see today.
Okay. And I do have 2 shows coming out this week. This is the first one, and my second one is going to be like my normal show, with my co-host and my Fourth and Go interviews. But during the Fourth and Go interviews, I did ask that question, and the responses that I received definitely should be taken into consideration. And I'm going to leave it at that, because I definitely want you to check it out And
Yeah,
even
I will
Russ
check that out.
and even Andrew, let both of you can kind of check it out, and then maybe get back to me on that, because
And
it's
ultimately, Ashley, as the director of compliance, you have some room here as well, because if you want to, if you increase moderators and the community is able to police itself, well, then it doesn't much matter to the SFL, because we're not necessarily having to monitor and police those things. So it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility, but people have to understand that when things are created, that it is going to involve some sort of manpower in some way by somebody.
right.
Whether it's someone within the community, or whether it's compliance, or whether it's the league itself. Everything matters and takes something to build, and people go, "Oh, Cam, you're taking this, it's just a channel. Why don't you just make such a big deal out of this?" Well, unfortunately, just a channel in a community full of 2,000 people, nothing is just with 2,000 people. And it goes back to the beginning of our conversation about the raft and the cruise ship. This is a cruise ship, and nothing happens in a cruise ship just because. Like, it all happens for a reason and a purpose. But I'll check out the show and see what we might be able to do about it.
And then we could talk about it, and if, like you were saying, if there is an increase in moderators, or maybe delegation of responsibility,
right,
to said moderators to watch specific channels for that, we can work something out. Terrell Sutherland, Charleston, asks, can we get a player intros before more games besides the championship game?
So I think I answered this, but it wasn't Sutherland.
Yes, it was Joseph Lama from Portland, because he asked about the game of the week, and where, if you have the game of the week, can they do the player intros?
So here's what you will probably see in season 20. I can't comment further, but in season 20, you will see a package of games in which there is a starting lineup of some sort that is presented, right? And in that big game kind of style. Is it going to be exactly like the championship game? No. Is it going to be more special than any regular average SFL game? Yes. So, we are making attempts for our 20th anniversary season and beyond to, do a little bit more highlighting, do a little bit more showcasing, with particular matchups throughout the calendar year. And that is a priority of the season 20 off season. So I'm hoping that, that the community will be pleased with what is rolled out. But I can assure you that it will be something that is not of the ordinary.
Love it. So, drafted rookies, right? Should drafted rookies not count against the cap in their first season? Now, this was mentioned by T.J. Harper, rookie class member.
Yeah. With every advantage comes a greater human loophole.
Okay.
People exploit, and sometimes it gets cringy. And this is totally exploitable. Essentially what you said, Harper, right?
Yes, TJ Harper.
Essentially what Harper is looking for, I think, is what the NFL does with its quarterbacks. Right? When you draft a rookie, that rookie is cheap because their salaries are essentially set at the position that they are picked. So if you're a first rounder, you're going to make this much for this amount of time. If you're a second rounder, you're going to make this much. Third rounder, you're going to make this much. Now, I would argue that those rules have contributed to the horrendous offensive play that we have seen in the NFL this season. Because there's been some rough games out there. Because you've got young players who are being thrown in the fire because it's cheaper to throw them in the fire. And while that is not an issue in the SFL, I think what you would see is you would potentially see veterans cast aside at the expense of winning games, right? Mm-hmm. Teams would have a difficult decision of, well, I'm going to cut this running back because I can get one on the cheap. And guess what? I can get a running back on the cheap every offseason because I can just go get another rookie over and over and over and over again and essentially have this star player that contributes 1,500 yards of my offense for absolutely free. And what does that mean for, a player or a team, for that matter, that cannot get that advantage? There's only 8 rookie running backs, 7, 6, some seasons, depending upon 2 ways. That means they're not available to everyone. Now, that does mean that the worst teams potentially get a running back, but what if a bad team doesn't need a running back? What if a team in the top 5 of the SFL draft does not need a running back? Do they almost have to discard the running back that they have because they need to keep up with the rest of the teams, and they need to make sure that they pick up a running back for free rather than going out and getting, a veteran player? And when you extrapolate it over multiple seasons, you would essentially have a rotating door of quarterbacks and running backs specifically because they have so much value. Mm-hmm. You would create a rotating door of people being thrown out of their positions. And so now a rookie who is drafted as a running back gets drafted and gets discarded. So that team goes and gets a new running back. Now they're looking for a home, but they can't find one because 8 more teams are going to pick another running back this season.
Yeah.
And now you create this world of customers who literally aren't wanted anymore. They're thrown in the trash because we're just getting new. And then on top of all that, Ashley, you have the problem that is created by having so many new players at quarterback and running back, which means every player that grabs a quarterback, running back, or wide receiver position is not grabbing a true position of need in the league. They're not taking linebacker, they're not taking defensive line, they're not taking kicker, they're not becoming an offensive lineman because they're becoming quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers. And all we're doing is creating a ton of problems, and we're only solving something in the short term. And solving something in the short term is good. It helps make bad teams better. That's a good short-term solution. But how it affects the long term of things is where the challenge comes in with some of these rules. And let me just say that when a player suggests these rules, it should not be the thought that a player is going to know how this affects the league 3 years down the road. Why would a player know that?
Right.
They don't know that. So assume that they don't know and handle with care. Because they don't know. That's just my advice. Because I believe that this suggestion from TJ Harper, I know where he's coming from. I know where he's going with the idea. I can understand where he's trying to get to. You just have to go beyond a little more, and that's my job to go beyond, right?
Right.
And it's not TJ's job to go beyond. It's his job to think about how to make the league better, because he's the customer, and that's what he wants. He wants the league to be the best it can be. So feel free to suggest ways of how you feel the league can be the best it can be. And it'll be my job to be the Debbie Downer and snap you back to reality of, well, here's what happens if we do that in 3 years. And that's okay, because I'm sure TJ will hear my response and go, that makes total sense. I don't know why I didn't think of that. Because you haven't been here. It's okay.
Right.
I wouldn't expect you to think of that. And that doesn't make you any less of an individual or any less of a smart guy or, a person that understands the SFL. It just means that you didn't think about it that way. And that's okay. Because sometimes even suggestions that would never work lead to an idea that does work. It is an interesting thought, but no, it would definitely not work or be practical in the SFL today.
Gotcha. Last question that we're going to touch on from the player, for the suggestion box, from Mr. Jeremy Vega, Mr. Money Hands. Owner. Money Hands. Says, I don't know the logistics behind the website and the player portal, but it would be a pretty cool idea if clicking on a player showed their career stats as well as their build, or if there was a direct link to their career stats or player page. What do you think about that?
So we know that we definitely can't put the ratings on our stat site.
Okay.
Why can't we put the ratings on our stat site? Because our stat site is not even originally built for football. The equations, like, for example, how completion percentage is calculated, that was put in and coded by us, by Liam, webmaster, and by the league. Like, we had to put that code in because there was no code that comes with the program that calculates completions divided by attempts, right? Okay. We have to put that in ourselves. So our stat program is essentially a base stat program that can handle a multitude of sports. But that's what it is, basic. But you have the ability to further customize it, like QBR, for example, is a very complicated formula. But we were able to put it in into our stat thing. So because that all has to be entered in, there's no way to just get all that information in there. We'd have to put it in there. And there's no way in hell that's happening. 700 players and 25 different attributes. We're talking about over 2,000 manual entries, and they're not even going to be accurate because progression is going to happen. And so they're never going to be right. Mm-hmm. So that is impossible. That will not happen under the current stat program, current website. The other way around, which I believe was screenshotted under this suggestion, is having a link or a pop-up to player stats from the portal. That is more doable. We go back to the previous question about the portal adjustments and that list of about 16 things that we're looking to have done. That's something that could be developed after that list is completed. Because obviously the things on that list have either been issues for, some time, or issues of this is not functioning, right? This is not functioning properly. Having a link to the player stats from the portal page is awesome. Right now, you can just have two tabs open. You can have the stats site open and you can have the player page open, but it obviously would be way better to be able to click player stats on the portal, and now you've got, well, this person is their number one wide receiver, but he actually is third on the team in receiving yards, right? Like that's something that you could easily see if the portal was attached to the stat website. So I do believe that it is doable and possible, but it's not something that will that moves up the priority list, as it is not a necessity, nor is it an issue that needs fixing.
Okay. Gotcha. Two more questions and we're good. Thoughts on where our next SFL convention will be? Are there places you're thinking? Is there places that you're pretty much kind of working towards? I know you like to get on that stuff kind of early. So.
Yeah. I'd say early front runners right now are Vegas and Ohio. That doesn't mean anything right now, quite frankly. Those two may not even be in the final three by the end of it all. It's very early. Typically, we would be farther along in this process, but given season 19 struggles, really set us back.
Gotcha.
Because if you think about, I would spend an average of 2 business days a week trying to fix the internet for 8 weeks. That's 16 business days lost just trying to do my job correctly. Those 16 days in the middle of the season after the convention, those are days that are typically spent making some calls and starting some business, right? Starting to get the wheels churning on the next event. So we are behind in that way. I would not rule out not having a 2023 convention. That is possible, just as a cost saving measure, not because we need to save money per se, but in order to make a 2024 convention, for example, the best it can be, right? So that there's more money in reserve in order to, put on a bigger event. But like I said, I have no reason to believe that we will not have a 2023 convention, right? It's just a matter of, trying to find the right situation. Vegas was very costly. It's a very expensive convention. It was something that Next Level and the SFL went in on together in the hopes that, that we could achieve some things from a production standpoint and from, a marketing standpoint. So we'll likely not see something of that scale. We'll likely see something of the Houston scale that you saw in 2021.
Right, which is great with me. I like that.
No, Houston, if I could take that hotel and put it 5 minutes away from the airport, we would be going back to Houston. Because I really loved that venue. And one of the things, what's crazy, Ash, I don't know if you felt the same way about Houston, but in hindsight's 2020, right?
Right.
I wish we would have just had the room that we had on Friday the whole weekend. Yeah. I wish we would have just had that room.
Yeah.
The amphitheater was cool. Sunday, we had a different spot that didn't work out great. But Friday, that room, we could have done everything in that room. And it was right off the bar and right off the pool. And we also had a cabana out there that we could have shown games on and all sorts of stuff. Like, if we ever did it again, that's the adjustment that we would make. But, hey, loud and clear. Every place has positives and negatives. And it was quite far from the nearest airport. Transportation was an issue.
Yeah.
And I, when a decision is made like that, knowing that that's going to be an issue, and then it, plays out how it played out for some people, that's something to consider. That's something that essentially puts a nail in the coffin for us ever doing that specific thing again. But it doesn't mean that we can't find a place that is similar.
Right.
So really everything is on the table. Vegas is still on the table, although there would be modifications and ways that we would adjust that event monetarily, right? I mean, it was a lot of money. That's kind of where things are at, but we are a little bit behind schedule where we usually are at this point. My goal is to have something settled before the start of the season, and I truly hope that we can get there. I can't remember when Vegas ended up getting announced. Do you remember, Ashley?
I want to say it was sometime in January that we were or in February that you actually announced it.
Yeah, I'd have to look back. I don't have it in front of me, but typically the goal is before the season, because I think there were some delays because we were in a contract negotiation with Next Level Sports. Yeah. It was all kind of wrapped up into it. We really try to give a 6-month runway to events like this. And even though we did not have a 6-month runway in Vegas, we still had a record crowd. Over 100 people attended. So, I would expect nothing less out of a 2023 convention. But we're going to have to work pretty quickly because even though last season was announced in that January-February window, we were way ahead of where we are today.
So why won't you?
2023.
Have you ever thought about just doing like a little small committee, like people that you trust, people that you know that maybe have connections or things like that. Just get those groups. Get that group together, let them know what you're looking for. Like it has to be within a certain distance from the airport. It has to be within a certain distance from other attractions because more than likely people are going to bring their children and they're not going to be sitting there watching the SFL games like we are. Have you ever thought about maybe creating like a group just for that?
I've never had an official one. But that's a pretty good idea. Shout out to BDG Hollywood, Mark Chisholm, and Kelly Daggs, among others who have helped in the past with some other conventions, asking around, looking for places, looking for venues. Typically, because it is my full-time job, Ashley, even though it takes some time to work out, typically I still have more time than anyone else to work on it. Even though sometimes it can, we can go weeks without, working on it. There's still I still have all of my hours in a day, to figure it out. And over time, I typically am able to get to those things faster. Whereas a committee, they're not getting paid to do it, and it's kind of in their spare time, and it's it's at their own pace, and it's not that they can't do it, but I'm not sitting around twiddling my thumbs either, right? I think that I think certainly as the league gets bigger and as the event gets bigger, I'm just naturally going to need some help in planning it all. I think we may be at that point where we're talking about 125, 150, even people attending and watching games and doing things like that. So I think it's coming, and that's a good suggestion. That's where we are today.
Okay, gotcha. And my last question before I let you go is, some people may want to know, why did you choose me to be your director of compliance? Out of all the people that applied, why me?
Well, 6-time community ambassador, or is it 7, or is it 8? I'm losing count.
It's 6.
Okay, it's 6. 6-time community ambassador. I have always thought that Ashley Jackson was a leading candidate to handle community issues. sometimes timing is just not okay. And for Miss Ashley, who's been through quite a bit in her own life, I was not going to contribute to her burdens in that way. It's something that I think Ashley and I have discussed for some time. But when the time is right, the time is right. And Ashley's in a good place, and it's never been a lack of trust of Miss Ashley Jackson. It's more about the time that anyone can handle a task. Marcus Dunhill, for example, sent me a message and was telling me about how he applied for a new job, and it would kind of take him away for long periods of time, and he didn't know, if he'd be able to fulfill his obligations. But life changes,
right?
So really, it since Mark Hurwitz vacated the position, there's been an opening and an opportunity to fill it, and that was the right time to fill it. So anyone that thinks that the decision was just made on a whim is just inaccurate, because Ashley's been serving this community for many, many years. There are others who showed interest. There are others who applied, but they quite frankly do not have the credentials with the community that Ashley has. And the way that I run my leadership team, I put people in positions to succeed, and I let them lead. And they are the authoritative figure in that department, because I trust them to be that authoritative figure in that department. And they will always have my full support until they don't. And you will know when they don't, when they get relieved of their duties.
Yeah.
So, until that time comes, Ashley Jackson has my 100 full support on her judgment towards what she feels like is best for the SFL, because I believe wholeheartedly that in all of her decisions, she is acting in the best interest of the SFL. She is the community shield, and has been for years. It doesn't take you long to listen to Ashley's show and understand who she is and how she carries herself. And I certainly wouldn't want to mess with her. So if you end up on her desk, done something wrong, and you're going to have to deal with her.
I appreciate the opportunity, Cam. And you're right. We have talked about this for a while. But you're also right that there were a lot of things that I was dealing with too, that, you can't take on any other responsibilities until you kind of clean up your own house, so to speak. So,
and sometimes as a leader, you have to save people from themselves.
Yeah. You
have to know when things are just, I'll bring back Dunhill again. Dunhill, he didn't want to process 440 contracts by hand anymore. He probably never wanted to do it. But he saw an opportunity to help. And so he did. And ultimately, if I would have kept asking for Marcus Dunhill's help, he probably would have kept giving it, right? Maybe he got paid a little more, or maybe I increased, the amount of time that he had to do it, but he probably would have ultimately kept doing it. But got to save people from themselves. I can't watch you do this anymore, Marcus. I can't watch you go through this struggle. I can't watch our league have to deal with this. I can't watch, Rochelle, Marcus, and oh gosh, I forget the third person that was helping out. It was so long ago, it feels like.
Ramen.
Yeah, Tom Ramen. Oh, so sorry, Tom. Yeah, and golly, Tom too.
Right.
Tom was putting in all of these, this stuff by hand into the file and all sorts of stuff, and it just you see what sacrifices and what people are willing to do for the product. But sometimes you just have to say, this is not acceptable.
Yeah.
This is just not acceptable, and you got to save them from yourself. And Ashley Jackson would save everyone in this community if she could, but I needed to say to you from your selfless self, and say, no, Ashley, you don't need to be doing this right now. You know, take care of yourself and your kids and all this other stuff. So, you know, once that was lifted, it was really hard to deny. Hey, Cam, why aren't you letting me help you? Because I'm pretty much great. So what's your deal? And, you know, you kind of throw up your hands and go, well, Ashley, you're right. You are pretty great. Let's give it a shot. See what you got. And so far, I think you've been doing an excellent job.
I appreciate it. I ain't quit yet, you know.
Please don't.
No. No, you know, like you said before, I pretty much have established a rapport with a lot of people here, a lot of people. And people, I'm not going to do anything that's unfair or biased, you know, even if I have to reprimand, like I've had to reprimand some of my own friends, you know, because of what they did. But at the end of the day, it is about the shield. It is about making sure that what happens here is beneficial, not to just the shield, but to everybody that's involved, to all players, you know? And so when I do things, I do it to be fair. I do it to be just. I do it, and I think about it. Like, I don't just do anything on a whim, or because I'm feeling a certain way, or because I had a bad day or something like that. No, I'm going to take my time. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to weigh all the options out, see what has happened before, and then move on with it. And I'm going to make it public. I'm going to make my rulings public, as I have been. So there is that transparency to see. I'm not going to necessarily name names, but those involved, they know who they are. But just so it can be a situational awareness for the league, like, hey, if this is what you're going to do, these are going to be the repercussions that happen after that, you know? And so hopefully by doing that, you can alleviate some of the issues that could arise before they even start.
And the community can see that those individuals are being held accountable for their actions.
Right.
It sets an example for others that you will also be held accountable for your actions. You know, if you can't get along. And I think that's one of the most underrated things about, you know, operating anything.
Yeah.
A decision comes out and people just automatically assume that you just decided. It took you like 3 minutes. And they say, this was on a whim. Or, there wasn't the proper care or consideration given about this issue. Trust us. When we, as a league, post anything, we know that 2,000 people are going to read it. That's pressure. Like, we have no desire to take any of these situations lightly.
No.
Because if we did, our lives would become 10 times worse, having to deal with the fallout of that on a whim thinking.
Yes.
And so when anything happens in the league, in any department, you know, any decision from, you know, putting a broadcaster on a specific game to deciding what to do about a power outage to, you know, handling a community disputes to, you know, to the rule book, anything in between, right? All of these responses, they come with a specific set of care because it's so much better for the entity to do it that way. You know, just take the 2-minute thing, for example, the 16 point. I mean, we must have spent, what, 30 hours on that one issue on an issue that happens 0.001% of all sims in league history. We spent 30 hours just on that to make sure that we covered our, just covered all the bases.
Right.
And if we're going to spend 30 hours on an issue that covers 0.001% of the league, you best be sure that if your issue is 0.001%, like, we're going to spend time on that issue if it warrants the time. I think there's a lot of things that warrants time in this community. And, just know that none of these things come easy. And they're very complicated, very complex problems at times, especially when you're dealing with issues of human emotions.
Right.
There's a lot of layers to go through. It's not as black and white as it seems, and it's not as cut and dry as it seems. There's a lot under there that has to be uncovered and sifted through and sorted through, and that's if everyone's telling the truth.
Yes. Yes.
Because that's not a guarantee either sometimes. So it's a lot, and just know that the TLC is there.
That's it. But Cam, you got any questions for me? Since I'm over here interrogating you, you got any questions for me before I let you go?
I want to know what your favorite episode of your podcast has been.
It's been too many. Like, I can name just a few.
You can name a few. That's good enough for me.
I mean, from Skippy and us having that conversation where, she talking about she was double jointed and she acted like she had broke her shoulder when Curtis pushed her. And he was like, "Oh, baby, you okay?" And then she just started laughing out of the blue, like, "Yeah, I'm fine." To meeting some of the representatives and actually having a podcast with the representatives from Next Level and from APM Music. God, it's been so many. I think some of my favorite aspects are the bloopers that I do after the show too, because it shows that not everything goes as perfect as you think it would, especially even if it's a recording. I mess up. People might say the wrong thing, or people might say some funny, outlandish stuff that I just want to say for the end because it had nothing to do with what we were talking about. It's been a whole lot. I mean, even from being able to recall the conversations I had with people like Matt Wilson and with Leonard Butler Sr., being able to just go back and listen to those. And even from our earlier podcast, when I used to do the, me and Damon was just talking about this, SFL Storytime, where I would like, yeah.
Forget Damon Tayc. I'll never forget that story.
Because in my mind, if certain people have this personality, you know, and in my mind, Amon was the great Amon. And then, he was so regal and thought he was better than everyone, but, but it was fun, showing my creative side, being creative. And if it wasn't for the league, I would not have known that I had that creative ability, but it's moments like that, that mean a lot, and that that'll stick with me for a very long time, and even our conversations, I feel like when you do a lot of shows, right? You've been on everybody's shows, but I feel like sometimes when you're on my show particularly, you kind of let your hair down, so to speak, and you're more relaxed, you're more open, because I give you that time to be like, I give you like, just say what you're going to say. And that doesn't matter how long you're going to take. Just get it off, get it off your mind. And so people can have a good understanding, so those are just some of them.
I'm an old school journalist, actually. You ask questions, I answer them. And that's what our interviews are.
Yeah.
It's not about pundits and opinions and things like that, which can complicate a show.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that there's not a place for that, but I'm certainly going to feel more welcome knowing that you're not going to quit back at me.
Right.
When I do say something. Now, I certainly can handle myself and don't mind a back and forth, because sometimes a back and forth can create innovation and new thoughts, right, about things, and it's good to get the conversation going. So I don't want anyone to take anything like I look down on that, but my preference is old school journalism, and that's asking questions and me answering them. And so that's what you do with all your guests, and I think it allows them to feel comfortable to answer however they feel like answering. So that's great. No, I think that I'm not sure that anyone will ever, in the history of the SFL, however long it goes, I don't think anyone is ever going to be able to achieve what you've achieved with the show. We're living in the golden era of a show. And I think that people, and this, I'm sure you know this, Ashley, because you say this about other shows. When shows stop, you miss them.
Mm-hmm.
And then you hear all about, everyone always talks about how they miss something.
Yeah.
Right? But nobody ever talks about that, don't ever leave or don't ever change when it's actually happening. So you don't have to, because you're here. And, I think people take it for granted. I don't take it for granted, because the fact that you show up every week, I know what that feels like.
Yeah.
And it's hard. And it's my job. So I can't even imagine having a different job and having kids and, having other things outside the SFL and still showing up every week. And you show up every week for the community. And even, I'd say every week, of course it's not 52, but you make up for it. You'll put out 2 shows a week like you are this week, just because that's who you are. But I just think it's incredible, and I can't wait for the SFL network to launch, and just every night at 12 o'clock you can turn on my TV and watch some SFL nights and see a bunch of shows I've probably never seen before.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to that.
And again, thank you for the opportunity, man. We wouldn't be able to do any of this without you putting together this league,
Well, it's all good. We still wouldn't be here if it wasn't for a bunch of other people helping me out, because I couldn't handle 700 people on my own.
Okay, listen.
And honestly, we wouldn't have gotten to 700 people without other people.
Yeah.
Because I would have been so focused on, just trying to keep the league afloat that I wouldn't have an opportunity to help the league grow in other ways. And so we never would have gotten to this point. So it is truly a team effort. All I should really be thanked for is for living and for starting it. The rest of it is everyone else's contribution. Obviously I'm a part of that, but I'm not the sole reason at that point. So it's been a lot of fun taking this journey with everyone.
Indeed. Did you have any more questions for me?
Let's see. What's your favorite thing to eat? Last meal. What you having?
Probably some barbecue beef ribs.
Barbecue beef ribs.
Mm-hmm. And with some homemade macaroni and cheese, maybe some greens with some cornbread, or macaroni salad, maybe a little bit of potato salad. Like if that's my last meal, I'm getting all of that, all of it, plus some coleslaw. Maybe a little bit of Wonder Bread on the side. Yes. Extra sweet Baby Ray's spicy barbecue sauce. And yeah, I think that's and then vanilla ice cream to end everything off.
Give me a break. Give me a break with that vanilla ice cream.
Oh, for those that don't know, one of my shows I had. So Cam, yes, Cam actually had a show, y'all. He did a show one time, and I was hoping that he was going to be able to continue that. That was hilarious. But he talked about his favorite dessert, which being ice cream, and I think it was Netflix and chill, right?
That was the week's favorite. Yes,
that was the week's favorite, right? And he was like, what did you say about vanilla ice cream? If you were eating vanilla, then you just don't know what good.
You don't know how to live or something like that.
Something like that. And I felt offended. I'm like, first of all, vanilla bean ice cream is absolutely amazing. No toppings.
It's a vanilla.
So that encompasses vanilla bean, vanilla, homemade vanilla, creamy vanilla, all of that. Vanilla.
Homemade vanilla, all those, that's just vanilla. Vanilla bean has something in it.
Yeah, it's vanilla. It's the vanilla bean.
Well, yeah, but it has a different flavor than just vanilla. I don't put them in the same category, honestly. Now, if you're eating vanilla bean, you're still not living.
No,
but at least you're in a coma and you got a machine breathing for you.
Oh, God.
Like you're almost there. You're not in the grave somewhere.
Oh my God. So what's your favorite? What is your favorite? Why are you asking?
Well, I mean, how can you have a favorite when there's like 50 different flavors that are delicious?
But if you only had one, if you can only choose one.
If I only could choose one, not depending upon the day. I mean, golly. I don't think you could ever go wrong with chocolate cookies and creams.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the best of the best.
I mean, it's alright,
Oh my God.
It's alright.
But see, I could have said anything, and if I didn't say vanilla, you were going to be like, right. So, I mean, you set me up for failure.
You could have said Rocky Road, and I would have been right with you. I actually love some good Rocky Road. Exactly.
I'll tell you what's great Rocky Road. You ever been to Crumble?
No.
That cookie store is taking the world by storm. They put out new flavors every week.
Uh-huh.
And there's these big old cookies, expensive as hell, but some of the flavors irresistible. And Rocky Road, that was awesome. That is a must-eat cookie. And I'm not the biggest Rocky Road person. Just what kind of nut is in Rocky Road?
It's not pecan.
Does it vary, or is it peanuts? Is it always peanuts?
I don't think it's peanuts.
I don't think it is either. Is it almonds? What is it?
I think it's almonds.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not big on like nuts in ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
Like I like nuts with like other desserts, like cheesecake or pie or cookies or something like that. But for some reason, ice cream is not my thing. But a good Rocky Road cookie, that's more my speed.
Well, I'll go ahead and send you my address. You can go ahead and send me one so I can, sample it, and see what you're talking about.
So I would, it depends on when it comes out.
Okay.
And even then, you can go get your own cookies.
Well, you just insulted me. I think you need to make it up. I think you need to make up for it.
That's a hard pass.
What? Oh man. Well, Cam, this is always a good time with you. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't want to be rude. Was that out? Was that all the questions you had?
Oh, as soon as I threw you under a bus, didn't get you a cookie, you were done with me.
No, that's why I asked you before I just ended it. You can ask me anything you want.
No, I don't think at this point, if people are still listening to this podcast, they're saying, "Oh, just let it end." I don't know if they want to hear us ramble on it.
Listen, one of my longest podcasts was 4 hours and 52 minutes. Tell me why that was one of them that got the most views.
Well, I certainly wasn't on it.
Yeah, because it would have been 6 hours of views. Easy. It's certain people. You, Demond.
Oh, bro, you've been talking all night.
No.
That's the jokes, man. All greatest hits in at the end, because that's what the people want.
That's what they want. That's what they want. You Green Bay fan, that's what they want.
They want me. Hey, I was in the Detroit airport and the Chicago airport recently with a Green Bay Packers shirt on. And all anyone that kept doing is bringing me flowers. I'm like, well, what the hell is going on again? They were all just mourning my season.
Rightfully so. Yeah, we all struggling, bro. We all struggling. That's why we got the SFL to kind of curb that. You don't have to think about all of that. But thank you, Cam, for being on. I really do appreciate it. I can't let you go, but I'll give you the last word. So that can be a song. You can sing me a song, because I still haven't found that. I still haven't found that karaoke video that you said that exists.
You don't have to be encouraged about that karaoke, because I just did it for him live and in person.
Oh, I hope they recorded it. Oh, I hope they recorded it. Damn.
I told them that the karaoke bar has the rights to the video, so they couldn't record it without copyright infringement, which was a total lie. Didn't need that. I just didn't need that around.
Oh my God.
But yeah, she'll let you know.
Okay.
She'll let you know how it went.
Gotcha. You got any shout outs you want to do? Think of somebody, Cam. Damn.
Well, I mean, there's just so many.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I've just been appreciative. Shout out to my cells. Shout out to my heart. I've just been appreciative. Just that I get to live on this planet. It's just crazy. I think Ashley. I think we all take ourselves too seriously. This is just a football league. Yeah. It's just a living. It's just a life. I want it to matter, but at the same time, we got way too much negativity in this world to be just wasting our energy. Wasting our energy on this stuff. I don't get why anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's tough. And look, I just went through a season full of negativity, full of frustration, full of anger, it's impossible to avoid. It's impossible to be a constant optimist. If I was a constant optimist, I'd drive my wife crazy. Right. Because it's just like, oh my gosh, I'm so sick of listening to this guy with his positivity. But at the same time, like you said, it's all about your perspective and how you look at things. You can sit there and talk about it, or you can make something positive out of it. And I think that's always the right way to go, because we got one life to live, and so you might as well enjoy it as much as you can, as much as you can take. So I'm just appreciative to be sitting here talking to you, killing 2 hours without internet, because that's great. Because if that's 2 hours, I haven't had to think about my problem.
There you go. Actually, it's 2 hours and 48 minutes. And all right, Cam. Until next time, you know that you got a spot on my show whenever you have the time to. Because I know how you know how you are, know what you do. You wear a lot of hats too, so but you always got a space.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. See you soon. And again, everybody, happy Thanksgiving. And
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Put what you're thankful for down in the comments if you haven't already. See y'all soon.